Hello book lovers and welcome to Book Talk Radio Club. My name is Claire Perkins and today I'm talking to Robert W. Bone. For more than half a century, travel writer and columnist, Robert has been a successful writer, author, editor and photographer in the US and abroad. He lived in Hawaii from 1971 to 2008. During that time he became known in the publishing world for the Maverick Guides series of books he began in 1977. In 2014, Robert wrote and published Firebone, an unvarnished memoir of thrilling experiences with newspapers, magazines and book publishers and the childhood and youthful love affairs that led up to them. Robert has been shot at and robbed, but as his grandmother predicted, everything he did would always come out for the best, and I guess it has. Hi Robert, thank you for coming on Book Talk Radio Club.
Well, thanks Claire, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Firebone, a Maverick Guide to Journalism. What a book. What was behind the decision for writing your memoir?
Well, I think I've known that I would write a memoir for years, even back in my childhood. Once I began realizing that my life was not like everybody else's, and it might be kind of interesting to somebody.
Sure, absolutely. So Firebone, why that particular title?
Yeah, that's really interesting. This is when I was working for a newspaper in upstate New York, the Middletown Daily Record. The publisher took an exception to something and sent a note to the editor saying "Firebone" with an exclamation point. And the editor took a look at that and threw it away and sent a message back to the publisher saying "Bones stays," and that was the end of that.
You were born in 1932, a member of the silent generation, too young for the greatest generation and too old for the baby boomers. It was at the time of the Great Depression. What are your most vivid memories from your childhood?
Boy, there are lots and lots of vivid memories. Of course, this was during World War II, very internationally conscious and so on. And I remember so much the Pearl Harbor Day and when the newspaper came and said we were at war and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And there's just too many to mention, really. I have vivid memories any time I was awake.
What a different time and now to today's kids, utterly alien. In 1939 you were among a few privileged 6-year-olds in the USA that saw a working television. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, I was 6 years old going on 7, and my parents decided to take me to New York City to the World's Fair. And there were lots and lots of interesting things there, but one of them, of course, was television. And when I got back home again, I found that I was the only kid that I knew would ever seen a television going.
Amazing.
So again, there was something special there.
Yeah, and they were tiny, weren't they? The screens were so small.
Sorry, I couldn't catch that one.
The screens were so tiny, weren't they? They were very small.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Probably about 2 or 3 inches across, I think. But still, it was pretty impressive to somebody that had never seen it before.
Well, sure, absolutely. There's a family story, isn't there, about your grandpa being the love child of Queen Victoria's son Bertie, who later became King Edward VII. How did that story start?
Well, some people would find these things laughable, I suppose, but I took it very seriously. I didn't hear about it until much later in life. When I was about 15 years old, I've heard that story, and my parents never mentioned it to me at all. And in fact, when I mentioned it to them, they kind of poo-pooed it. But my father's brother, my Uncle Jay, he was absolutely certain about it, and he had lots and lots of, a certain amount of detail. And in later years, he actually even went to oh gosh, I forgot where it is now. It's somewhere near Strandingham to find even more evidence. So anyway, it could very well be true, but on the other hand, it might not be.
During your high school, you were, to put into your words, waffling backwards and forth between choosing musical journalism as a career and finally set your mind to study journalism. Why journalism and not music?
Yeah, well, I soon discovered that journalism, that the music was not going to pay much of anything. And with journalism, I had a chance of being much more financially successful. And that was that.
Tell me about your first journalism job at the Middletown Daily Record.
Well, actually, it wasn't really the first one. The first one, I have to say, was at the Buffalo Courier Express, where I was a staff photographer during the summer. This is while I was still at college. But the Middletown Record, though, was pretty interesting because when I was in the Army, somehow or other I heard about the Middletown Record and the fact that it was going to be a history-making newspaper, having photographs, for example, in greater detail, because it was an offset daily. It was a technical achievement, really. One time, the people from publishers from other papers all over the country would come to Middletown to see about that paper. And as soon as I heard that photographs were going to be a big deal, I was on board, and I asked them to hire me, and they flew me to New York while I was still in the Army, and to describe the whole thing. And the only thing they said was going to be a little while before I was going to be was going to be able to take the job, because they just didn't have everything ready to go yet.
Right.
But nevertheless, it was really a great choice. I went back for a while to the Buffalo Courier Express, but as soon as they called me and said that they were ready to go in Middletown, that was it.
You write about your friendship with Hunter S. Thompson and the founder of the Gonzo Journalism movement. First of all, who was Hunter S. Thompson and what was the Gonzo Journalism movement?
Yeah, a lot of people called it a movement, but it wasn't really a movement. The Gonzo Journalism was Hunter sitting alone. It was sort of like what they call Romano Clef, I guess, or exaggeration and so forth. He believed in covering journalism by exaggerating, and there was a basic truth in what he wrote, but on the other hand, it was much more colorful than anything kind of reporting that was going on in radio or newspaper or anywhere else.
Right. Right. And you worked for the Time Life book division in the early 60s. What was life like then for journalists back then?
Yeah, well, this was kind of an unusual job in a way. I had several things that had happened to me before I took that job at Time Life Books. I worked for Popular Photography magazine for a while, for example, and I wanted to go to work for Look magazine, and Look was hiring, and they were going to do a history-making job on it, and then they didn't hire me after all. They said that I had been to too many other jobs or something. I don't know, but it was their loss. So I took the first crazy thing I could find, and that was to go to work on a magazine in Brazil, which I did for a year. But then when I came back to New York, I heard about Time Life Books, and they hired me as a reporter basically, but they quickly made me a picture editor, and that was a very satisfactory job at that period
Right, right. You then went to live in Mallorca, followed by Hawaii. I'm envious. You visited every continent and covered at least 75 countries. For 4 decades, thousands of travellers to Hawaii, Australia and New Zealand carried the latest editions of your prize-winning Maverick Guides. What were these guides and why were they called the Maverick Guides?
Well, I had left the Time Life books after 3 years to go to work for Temple Fielding. Temple Fielding at that time was the big guidebook writer for Americans visiting Europe,
Right.
at least the more well-to-do ones anyway. And he wanted to start a paperback version of it, sort of geared to economical travel, I guess you might say. And so he hired me for that. And that was a time that everything seemed to be going to hell back in my own country. Martin Luther King was killed and Bobby Kennedy and all that kind of stuff. And I said to my wife, let's move to Europe and never come back. And so anyway, we did that, and I learned a lot about that kind of coverage, guidebook coverage there, and I wanted to extend it even further, to the Pacific and so forth.
Mm.
But Fielding didn't want to do that. So I thought, well, I'll just quit and do it myself. And so it took a while because we moved to Hawaii, and I was pretty sure that I could get on the local paper there, because I had, really good qualifications, and they did. They hired me. But always I intended to start the guidebooks. And after about 2 years, I began to do it, and it worked out really well.
Where did your taste for travel start?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Where did your taste for travel start?
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Well, I was always interested in travel, even back as a child, But my parents took me to the World Fair, and they also drove me all over the West, and I learned about caves and cowboys and things like that. I always knew that I was going to like travel. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that I was going to advise other people about it, but nevertheless, that was in my future.
You have some wonderful reviews for Firebone, of which you must be very proud, including A Life Well Lived and An Amazing Man's Life Story and a Great Read. If you could change one thing in the story of your hugely fascinating life, what would it be?
Well, I don't think I would change a thing, Claire. This was my destiny.
Good answer.
And I lived the life I wanted to live. The only thing that was kind of disappointing is once computers were invented and so forth, guidebooks didn't mean quite so much. And I had my publisher, who was very good to me while the going was good. I did guidebooks to Hawaii, to Australia, to New Zealand. But once the internet was invented, or so it seemed, they took those books right out of print, and that kind of left me hanging for a while.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was in the travel industry, and we used to do niche holidays, vacations to the US. And once the internet came on board, that was it, because people could do it themselves. They could look up all the information themselves, and there was no longer any need for any specialism from us. So I understand exactly what you're saying. Exactly. Lastly, where can Book Talk Radio listeners purchase Firebone?
Oh, the title?
Yeah,
the title came. Yeah, the title came from that's what I was telling you before about the publisher. He had sent that note, the Firebone note, to the editor back at the Middletown Record and so forth. So I just thought that was kind of a dramatic way of starting a thing.
And where can people purchase the book?
Well, a lot of bookstores have it around the country, but the most reliable and quick and fast way to do it, I think, would be to order it from Amazon. The service is great. You send for it, and a couple of days later you have it. I think that's the best way to do it.
All right. Well, thank you, Robert. That was great. Please come back on Book Talk Radio Club again. I'd love to chat with you and hear how you're getting on. In the meantime, good luck for the future, and thank you, everyone, for listening to Book Talk Radio Club. Thank you very much, Robert.
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot, Claire. Thank you.
Thank you.